It's the biggest game of the weekend. Iowa, UConn, we got you covered here. A crossover edition. Locked on UConn, Locked on Hawkeyes. We break it all down here today.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon. That's Mark Zanetto, and this is a crossover edition of Locked On. Locked On Hawkeyes for me, Locked On UConn over there as we get ready for the Final Four tonight. Mark, good to catch up with you. We've done plenty of these during football season. Always a lot of the fun crossovers that we have. Not very often we get to do it for women's basketball, but what this Iowa women's basketball team certainly morphed into over the last couple of seasons, coupled with obviously the historic nature of UConn. Fun to get together. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Well, kicking things off, and we'll go back and forth here, talk a little bit about breaking the game down individually, but let's start with this Husky team. We have kind of the baseline of it, right? A lot of injuries this year. They've been really banged up, still an incredibly talented roster. If you can, for the Hawkeye listeners out there wanting to get a little more information on this UConn team, a little bit deeper than just a cursory glance, but give us a little bit more on how this season has unfolded.
Yeah, no, that's a great intro, and I appreciate you. This UConn team is not the traditional UConn powerhouse that people are used to on the women's side. After UConn lost to Texas in December, they fell to 4-3 on the season, and we're kind of spiraling out of control. I don't think anyone in their right mind in Connecticut or around the country could predict that they'd be going up against Caitlin Clark in Iowa tonight, considering the start. But Gino Auriemma, who is coming up on his 40th year at UConn, which is crazy to me, said, I don't even think we're going to make the NCAA tournament. So he went with a incredible lineup switch that kind of turned their whole season around. They do like essentially a 3-point guard lineup, and it was not the greatest situation initially with freshmen KK Arnold, Nika Mule, and then Paige Bueckers. So they're all natural point guards, right? And so that, for whatever reason, was able to kind of, rally this team around the fact that they were being so unselfish. So we don't care who has the ball. We're gonna share it. Paige obviously is our version of Caitlin, and so, but that was the catalyst that turned this season around. And with only 7 healthy players, we're going to need all 3 of those folks to be able to do what we want to do tonight, and that's upset Iowa.
It's on this side for the Connecticut listeners out there. A season that has gone as anticipated, losing 2 starters off of last year's team that played for the championship. People thought there were going to be some growing pains, and they have been, but this has been overall, I think, a smoother transitional year than a lot of people anticipated. Caitlin Clark has taken a big step forward. They've had some injuries themselves. Molly Davis, their former starter in the backcourt with Caitlin Clark, she is out. Tried to make a go of it practice. And yesterday, in one of the most heartbreaking videos I've ever seen, one of the TV reporters here in Iowa had her taking some shots. And she walked over to the bench and sat down by Coach Bluter and basically told Coach Bluter, not going to happen. And then just the way that her head dropped, and really, really sad, really tough to do.
Yeah.
And she was a spark plug. She was a playmaker. But outside of that, they've been relatively healthy. And in a way, I think they actually might be a better team without her out there and having Sydney Fulter out on the floor. So it's disappointing, obviously, that it plays out that way. But a Fulter is more of an inside-outside player, better defensively, better rebounder, more size at 5'11", as opposed to 5'4" of Molly Davis. So that definitely helps out too. But this year, I think for most people, yes, they're preseason, top 5 for everybody this year. People thought they had a chance of getting back. It's gone a lot smoother than anticipated this year, and that's been a fun one to watch. All right, so we're going to talk about our keys to the game and the way that this goes and plays out. But I got a couple of things. As we get into the debate, right? Caitlin versus Paige. And I'm sure you've been seeing it on your YouTube page and hearing in the comments or reading on social media, and it turns into that. It's not exactly fair, but there are parts of it that absolutely are going to play there. Very simply, is it going to start off the game? Do you believe that Paige Bueckers right away is going to be guarding Caitlin Clark?
I don't, and only because of the amount of players that Gino has to kind of rotate of the 7 that he's going to play. If they were fully healthy, they lost 5 players this year to season-ending injuries, which is crazy.
Mhm.
If they had a full roster and they're 10 deep and that rotation is the what it was, what his thought was initially on the season, I think 100% you'd see it. But because of trying to kind of stave off foul trouble, you're going to see a mixture. I could honestly, Trent, I said the other day in a women's basketball specific show where I said it wouldn't surprise me if Gino does junk defense and does a box and one.
Yeah.
To see just to kind of throw a different look at them. And see what the adjustments are there. That's what I expect, but I shouldn't say expect. That's what I would hope he does, and then we'll go from there. Those are my thoughts.
One thing we've seen over the 4 years of Caitlin Clark is a ton of that,
Yep.
because this is not a roster built like UConn's roster with 7 McDonald's All-Americans. Even as banged up, we've seen a ton of it. One thing that I will say is those junk defenses can work for small stretches. They don't work very long. I mean, Caitlin is
Sure.
just so smart and understands, and they've seen them so many times where you go up a lot of teams, they haven't seen them, or maybe they see them once or twice throughout the course of the year. Iowa does it so much. And the other component is Iowa likes to do that themselves. Lisa
Mhm.
Bluter, she is, I've watched a lot of black basketball my 40 plus years of being here, and I will tell you, she loves junk defenses about as much as any successful coach that I've ever seen. She'll do triangle and 2. She'll do box and 1. She'll do line and 3. She'll do all kinds of different things like that that we've seen in the past from her. So because they also practice it defensively, they see it on that end of the floor too. So they're usually ready for it. A couple of players I want to get your perspective on. I thought, and again, not knowing UConn the same way that you did, I thought Mull would get the first crack of it. Is
Yeah.
that what you're
Yep.
expecting to see?
Yeah, Nika Mule definitely will get that. I think we'll get that first crack. She's a little more physical, around the same size. I think she also is fiery. She's a competitor. She's not going to back down from a challenge. I don't think you'll see the same. Takes nothing. I don't want LSU fans to get in my mentions as much as Alabama fans on the men's side have gotten my mentions for making a comment. You're not going to see her do one of these, and shake her hands. She's gonna go at Caitlin. She's probably, I want Paige is probably the ultimate competitor, but I mean they rival each other, so that would make sense to me. Whether they do it or not is Gino's story. So Gino is unorthodox, as you may probably already know. But my key to all of this is I'm gonna ask you, turn it around.
Yeah.
How do you think they're going to handle Paige? I mean, she's a unique player in her own right. A lot of people felt before she was injured, it's Caitlin's equal. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. We'll find out tonight. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think they're going to start Gabby Marshall on her. She's been the best
Okay.
on-ball defender for Iowa the last 4 years, and that's likely going to be the assignment that they're going to put on her. We've seen Gabby guard anyone from a 5'5" type of point guard all the way through to a 6'1" small forward. She's guarded all types, and she is by far their best perimeter defender. If it doesn't go big real well, because Gabby's not the biggest player, she's not a huge defender on that, right? And kind of the physicality, it's more her quickness and her speed of what makes her a good defender. Then I think they would slide Kate Martin over and maybe go that way. If they do that, though, maybe they're going to have to go a little bit big. And that's going to be an intriguing part. What led to the comeback and what eventually turned into that third quarter as Iowa ran away from LSU in the Elite Eight, it was Hannah Stuelke, who is not a traditional post player. She was in foul trouble. They went to their traditional post, and Addison O'Grady, who most all of us thought was going to be a starter this year, she wasn't, didn't average much throughout the course of the season. She was excellent defensively, made a couple of shots, had a good short jumper from about 12 feet away. She can do that. She did it a year ago, and that's why we thought we were going to see her more this year. That's going to be a component to this one, too, is Iowa, if foul trouble crops up, or if just the game plan isn't working, do they need to go back to the traditional? Because that's what I keep coming back to, Mark, is Edwards inside concerns me, I think, even
Yeah.
more than Bueckers. I think we both feel that probably Caitlin Clark's going to get hers, Paige Bueckers is going to get hers, right? It's the other ones. And when we continue here on this crossover edition, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We'll get into our keys for the matchup, talk about how we anticipate this thing's going to play out, and we'll eventually get to prediction time as we count down to tip-off. It is the Final Four, and we got you covered here. Locked on UConn and Locked on Hawkeyes as we continue. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time and the Game Time app. Check that. Robinhood. There it is. Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Claim as Q1 as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. All right, back with you once again here on the crossover edition. It is Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On UConn. I'm Trent Condon. He's Mark Zanetto. And Mark, all right, keys to the game. I told you maybe my biggest concern is Edwards inside.
Yeah.
We saw Angel Reese. We go back to the upset win a year ago against South Carolina. Yes, Iowa won the game behind a Herculean effort from Caitlin Clark and a 40-point triple-double. However, they got doubled up on the boards in that one. So Edwards inside, that's a big concern there for me, and the style of play defensively, the physicality that they play with. I took a look at some of those advanced numbers individually for each of the players for UConn. I was blown away. I mean, I can't remember seeing a team that is that good defensively. I think this is just going to be so different on that end of the floor compared to what I was seeing. How about you? What concerns you most when you go from the opposite viewpoint?
Yeah, I'm concerned that we're going to be so focused on Caitlin Clark. What happened with the LSU game happens to UConn. You had Sydney Affolter averages 16, only had 8, but it was Kate Martin, Hannah Stuelke had bigger games. Kate only averages 12. She had 21 against LSU. Can she repeat that performance? I think she can. Hannah Stuelke, same thing. She only averages 8 points. She got 14 against LSU. So I feel like sometimes when the focus, and this is just human nature, right? Whether you're playing help defense, you mentioned some advanced metrics. It doesn't matter how much a coach prepares you for what you're going to see. When you're in that moment, when the pressure's on and you're playing help defense or whatever, maybe you leave people open that you normally wouldn't because of the impetus to kind of stop Caitlin Clark. So she's such a presence that I hope that Gino has them locked in to hopefully stay at home when they need to not get beat backdoor the way she likes to catch folks on passes because she's such a great passer. So to me, that's the key. Is it's okay if Caitlin Clark gets her average. She's averaging almost 30 a game. That's fine. If she goes for 40 and the other folks on her team have plus games, if you will, then Connecticut's in trouble because just based off of the amount of players they have healthy, I'm worried that they're going to run them out of the gym. That's my concern, is just the healthy bodies. I know Gino's going to try to stop play every once in a while, take some healthy timeouts versus kind of to talk over things just to kind of let them catch their breath. He did that against USC a few times. But on the opposite side, do you feel like the women I mentioned, right? Whether it's Kate Martin, whether it's Hannah Stuelke, I think Sydney Affolter will end up having a better game than she had against LSU. Do you think those two girls will have a bigger impact in this game, or do you think they're going to be around their same average?
So when you talk about Kate Martin, she's one of the seniors on this squad. And Kate is a beloved figure. They call her the glue. Her aunt is actually the top assistant coach. And since she was a little kid, always wanted to play for Iowa, though she grew up on the wrong side of the river over there in Illinois, but always wanted to be a Hawkeye. And she is just that. And whatever they need, if it's a big rebound, if it's a defensive stand, if it's a steal, a block, whatever it is, Kate Martin's that kind of player. So she's one you always know you're going to get something out of. Maybe it's not going to be scoring in this one. You're going to get something. For me, really the X factor of this team, and we touched on a little bit earlier with the Molly Davis injury, is Sydney Affolter. She's Chicago tough. Don't let the blonde hair fool you. She has toughness to her. She's 5'11", but she plays like she's 6'1". She's got this ability. Not only can she knock out down shots from the outside, really good off the bounce. She can do those kind of things. The moment's never too big for her. So Affolter's would be the one that I would definitely look at. And she has changed this team. And really, it's made me believe, because throughout even February, I didn't think this was a team that was even going to get back to the Final Four.
Hmm.
I had my questions about this squad, and a Fulter being inserted into the starting lineup because of her inside-outside nature. They become a better defensive team with her on the floor. That has given me the hope. So a Fulter would definitely be the one that I'd be looking at what she can do. Stulke's interesting because when she's at her best, she had a 48-point performance earlier this season at Carver Hawkeye Arena. Then a week later, Caitlin Clark had to break a record and score 49 because that's what Caitlin does. But Stulke is incredibly fast. She's not your traditional post. She's 6'2", but she is super athletic, super fast, beats teams up and down the floor. That's what she did against Angel Reese. That is when she is at her strength, is moving with it. But she's still a young post player. And you know what happens there? Reach, you lean those arms over a little bit, those kind of things, and that's a concern with her. But she can get going at a high level. And if she does, and if that screen and roll game is working with her and Caitlin Clark, look out, because you can try whatever you want defensively, but if that's working at that kind of level where, hey, we're going over the screen every single time, we're making it hard on Clark, not letting her shoot, but you're not getting back on Stulke, she can beat you a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I agree there. I really do think Aaliyah Edwards needs to be on her game. And that's where going back to not having, backup for her. Ice Brady is a freshman. She's 6'3". She's more of a power forward than I'd say a 5. And even Aaliyah is more of a 4 too, but she's kind of playing as the 5 because of the necessity. But she's still a fantastic post player, 6'3". She is an absolute tank down low. I think she is going to have a similar effect that Angel Reese had in terms of on the boards. I don't know if she'll get 20, but I think that that's part of her game for them to watch out for the Hawkeyes to watch out for. My biggest, I mentioned her. You mentioned who could be an X factor on UConn. I don't think even defensively. Ice Brady gave UConn, I believe, 7 points off the bench against USC. And she's not an offensive threat. So if they can get contributions like that from Ice, who's 6'3", she's a freshman. What's the old saying? When you're a freshman, you're dumb enough to not know what's going on, and you're not smart enough to understand the moment. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Freshmen just don't know what they don't know. We have a few of them who are just ice water in their veins, and her name is Ice, right? I mean, that's the cool, maybe one of the coolest names of all time. She will be ready to rock. I expect a workman-like performance from her, or a workwoman's-like performance. I'll change that, and I'm looking forward to the matchup, just because there are so many different storylines that you could go with. Paige versus Caitlin, but the teams themselves, I just think they're both I feel like all of the folks that we've mentioned today want to put their imprint on this game, so it's not just about Caitlin and Paige.
Yeah. It's interesting what it's morphed into, because I'm sure we both remember the game in the NCAA tournament about 3 years ago, when they were both freshmen, and the buildup that was building then. And most everybody said that Paige Bueckers was just the better player, and she was at the time. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And injuries have changed that, but we know what a competitor both of these young women are. I mean, that is what has driven them to this level. Has there been talk, though, in your guys' circle out there about Gino not recruiting Caitlin Clark, or not at the level? Because I know he watched plenty of her games at the AAU grassroots circuits. Obviously saw her play, and I can understand with Bueckers coming in, just don't think that they can work together. But has there been much of that talk, like, hey, Gino, what were you thinking there?
No, there hasn't, and I think mostly because this is hopefully your fans don't take this as a sign of disrespect, because I feel like we all respect Caitlin Clark. I think she's done an amazing thing for the women's game. She's elevated to a point where they're leading Sports Center and having all of this notoriety. I think the issue that I would have with some of those comments, not from you, but just from people that are like, well, he didn't recruit her. It's hard to know what's going to happen 4 years from now in the moment, right? You had a recruit in Paige Bueckers who you felt like was going to be your next Diana Taurasi, next Brianna Stewart. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out for Paige the same way, because she's been saddled with injuries. So it's kind of a bit of revisionist history. So there really hasn't been any of that. I think one thing that you can always count on from the Connecticut faithful is, I did a show about this the other day, Trent. It's like the national media has started to anoint women's college basketball. It's like, well, we've been doing it since 1995. It's like, welcome to the party. We've been around for 40 years talking about women's basketball. Where have you been? So you're not going to hear any of that stuff from us. We respect Caitlin Clark and respect the women's game.
Going to be fun, no doubt about it, as we get ready for tip-off here tonight. We'll continue here on this crossover edition, Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On UConn, and we will break things down a little bit further. Give our predictions for the game as we break it down. It's UConn and Iowa tonight in the Final Four. Winner, will they get South Carolina? We'll also talk about that as we continue here on this Locked On crossover edition. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. Makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch or tip-off, whatever sporting event you're talking about. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices viewed from your seats, and their lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and all kinds of tickets. I used this last year. Went up and watched my Minnesota Twins in the playoffs against Toronto. I used Game Time. It was amazing. And I love the ability to see exactly where my seat was and what I was going to see when I got inside a Target Field and watched, yes, for the first time in 2 decades, the Twins actually win a playoff series. Views from your seats is incredible. And the last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater, and a whole lot more. Plus their lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Trent and Mark back with you one final time here on this crossover edition, Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On UConn. So as we get ready for the predictions, Mark, one thing, the tempo I think is going to be the biggest part of this. I anticipate UConn doesn't want to get in a track meet because of their lack of depth, coupled with that's the way and the style that Iowa plays. We've seen a couple of teams try it. We've seen teams be successful at it. And this is another difference with this Iowa team. In the past, if you were able to dictate tempo against Iowa, you were going to beat them. Iowa's been able to win some grinded out type of games against kind of those physical teams. Back in the second round of the tournament this year, West Virginia did that, and they were able to find a way to escape. K-State earlier this season. There's teams that have been able to do that, and that is a difference, but that's got to be at the top of the whiteboard, right? Dictate tempo for UConn.
Yeah, 100%. I'll go even a step further is UConn, they got down early to USC. They went on, it was a game of runs. They answered USC's early lead with a 9-0 run of their own to pull even, and then went on a subsequent 8-0 run in the second quarter and built a 6-point lead against USC. Gino called a timeout because of the tempo got too fast.
Yeah.
Because he's got to be mindful of the fact that he's only, I hate to keep saying it, 7 healthy players, right? So he knew that his team needed to regroup, and it's the last thing you want to do as a coach when your team has momentum. So it is a very weird, counterintuitive way that he's trying to manage these games. And that is as soon as you said tempo, you basically set me up for it, because that is 100% going to be, if UConn is able to pull this off, it's going to be because the game was kept in the 70s at tops, maybe low 80s. If you look at some of their wins, they beat USC 80-73 in the tournament. They won 72-64 against Syracuse. They won a rock fight against Duke in the Sweet 16, 53-45. So they can play whatever pace you want, but they definitely don't want to get into that, back and forth with Caitlin in Iowa.
Up and down the floor. That's going to be a huge one. 2 other numbers I want to get your perspective on. So I saw 3-point rate, just in terms of number percentage of possessions that they take a 3-pointer. Not real high, like in 260 range, something like that. But usually when you see teams like that, their free throw rate is really high. That's not the case either. So is it because we know the mid-range game, obviously at Paige is incredible. Is it a lot of that? Is it because maybe they use the mid-range more than most college basketball teams do?
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think we don't put fatigue up on the list as the biggest reason why some of these free throw numbers dip. I mean, at the end, when they were trying to ice that game against USC, they missed 7 straight free that was at the end of the game.
Yeah.
They were up 12, and most UConn fans, including myself, were sitting there going, all right, they're tired. We're probably going to still win this game, but can we make it like at least one of two every time we go to the line just to kind of keep them at bay? So that could be something to watch at the end of the game. If Iowa is down and they do have an opportunity to get back in, if they do foul or they're trying to kind of scramble to get back in the game, there could be a moment where we're looking at that. Because if you look at the numbers, Paige is an 84% free throw shooter. Aaliyah Edwards is 75%. Ashlyn Shade is 91.3%. So these are really good free throw shooters. So, but when you're playing 38, 40 minutes the entire time, you're not sitting, that weighs on you. So that could be part of it. I also think they're a team that just found their identity as they went through this lineup change. And when you have 3 point guards on the floor, point guards typically, your traditional point guards aren't traditionally your best shooters, right? They're typically people who facilitate. So you have 3 point guards that are trying to facilitate for everybody else. So who shoots, right? So I think that's part of it too. There's maybe a little indecision with roles. So while that lineup has worked, you're still playing people out of position.
Hawkeyes versus Huskies before our thoughts on this game. There's a game before it. It is NC State. They've been giant killers. You saw them earlier this year when they got an 11-point victory against the Huskies, against South Carolina, who we, of course, saw a year ago in the Final Four and knocked them off in undefeated streak there. I think NC State keeps this close. They played so well against the top-level competition. Maybe that's more the hope than anything that regardless of who gets there, they'll be pushed a little bit in this one. I like NC State and the points at least in the 11.5. What do you think we're going to see in game one?
Yeah, no, it's a great one. There's a lot of weird stuff happening with NC State, right? For the women and the men coming into the tournament. So it's hard to bet against destiny when you're talking about NC State and the Wolfpack. In North Carolina, I know they're calling it the law of the wolf. I don't know if you can bet against them, but South Carolina is a juggernaut. I think Dawn Staley has that group in a good position. They beat us earlier in the year. We're not the same team we were then. I think we're obviously a little bit more cohesive, and with this seven girl lineup, I really think that NC State is going to keep it close. I'm with you there, but I think South Carolina pulls it out in the end.
I think we're on the both sides on the same one of that one. Will we be on the same side of this one? Huskies versus Hawkeyes. What do you got on your side, Mark?
Yeah, I'm going to be a homer because I do truly believe that a healthy Paige Bueckers is the better all-around player than Caitlin Clark. So I apologize to all of your Iowa fans. I love Caitlin. I think she's fantastic. I hope she goes on and has an incredible career in the pros, makes millions of dollars, and transcends women's basketball. But Paige was the queen before she lost her crown. And I think this is a moment where she can take that crown back and maybe fulfill her destiny of winning a national championship with UConn and winning their 12th title. First things first, I think UConn wins this game in a very close game. I'm going to say UConn 78, Iowa 75.
So throughout the week, I have flip-flopped. I hate flip-flopping. I like to have an opinion, have a thought, have a pick, and go with it, and I haven't been able to throughout the course of the week. There's some days I talk myself into I would not just win the game, they win it by double digits, because we've seen those moments where Caitlin is just the best player on the floor and transcends and does those kind of things. And then I come back and I talk about what Gino is going to do game plan-wise, what this team is defensively, and how Iowa probably hasn't seen a defense quite like this coupled with a team as talented offensively. I've been back and forth. I've been all over the place. I call this my emotional hedge. Because, yes, I will bet on it and FanDuel. I will take UConn to win the game, and they do dictate pace. 74-70. Huskies get the victory. I'll play a little bit on the money line. It's plus 132 right now as I look at the FanDuel app. So plus 132 on the Huskies. Talked to some of my people in the desert earlier today. They said they're seeing a lot of steam on Iowa from some of their sharper players out there. So that's what interesting. And 3.5 across the board right now out in Vegas.
Yeah, I was about to say that it's jumped a point. I think the opening line was 2.5. But then if you look at, whatever you want to consider ESPN analytics, their BPI, whatever.
Yes.
It's about 60-40 on UConn, which is surprising to me, but I get it. The defensive analytics will tell you that UConn should stop Caitlin Clark to a certain extent. But as I had a guest on earlier on a different show, he said Vegas never ever accounts for it. Whatever that it is, there's a place for analytics, but when it comes down to, we get down to, and I'll shout out Kenton Gibbs, Locked On Wolfpack, from our network. So yeah, he's right. There is never a moment where you can account for that it factor. And Caitlin has it, Paige has it. Which supporting cast is the one that steps up is going to be the difference in the game.
No doubt about it. Well, looking forward to it. We're a few hours away. Get this out there for everybody to have a chance to take a look and get ready for a late night of basketball, UConn and Iowa. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes and Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again. We got instant reaction coming. I'm sure Mark's got you covered. He's got a couple of teams to worry about with the Final Four. Mark, been fun. We'll talk again soon.
Take care, man. Thanks.